Vini Junior again. Vinicius Junior lashes in the equaliser.
Can Brazil win the World Cup?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Now we have the proper coach for this situation, I think. So Carlo can be the coach that can lead these guys to be a very, very strong group to win the World Cup.
Somewhere right now, in a coach's office in Europe, in South America, in every corner of this World Cup still alive, someone is staring at a whiteboard trying to solve a problem that doesn't actually have a solution. The problem is Brazil. Not the Brazil of 2 years ago, the one everyone had quietly stopped fearing. Not the Brazil that lost at home in qualifying for the first time in its history. This is a different animal entirely, and the numbers should terrify anyone paying attention. 9 goals scored at this tournament, only 2 conceded. A front 3 that includes a player currently outscoring everyone at this World Cup except Lionel Messi. A bench so deep that the substitute who won their last knockout match would start as the first-choice attacker for at least half the remaining nations in this competition. Here is the real nightmare hiding inside all of that, though. The part that should genuinely keep opposition coaches up at night. There is no clean way to defend against this team anymore. Double up on Vinicius Jr., and Mateus Cunha or Rayan will punish the space you just left open. Sit deep and try to frustrate them. And Bruno Guimaraes will pick you apart with a pass you never saw coming, the way he did to send Japan crashing out in the dying seconds of their last match. Press aggressively to force mistakes and you'll run directly into a defense built around Alisson Becker, one of the calmest, most commanding goalkeepers alive, protected by 2 center-backs who have already proven themselves against the best attackers in Europe. Every single approach has a counter built directly into this squad. That is not an accident. That is design. And the most unsettling part of all this is that Brazil are not even close to their ceiling yet. They stumbled through a scare against Japan, went behind, looked shaky, and still found a way to win it in the 96th minute anyway. A team that wins ugly, that survives its own bad performances, and still comes out the other side with 3 points, is the single most dangerous kind of opponent in a knockout tournament. Good teams beat you when they play well. This Brazil side is now showing it can beat you even when it plays badly. And if that's true when they're not firing on all cylinders, every remaining nation in this competition should be asking themselves one very uncomfortable question. What happens the day this team actually clicks? 24 years ago, that question would have felt ridiculous to even ask. Brazil have spent over 2 decades being the most talented team in almost every room they walked into, and still finding new, increasingly painful ways to lose. But something fundamental changed in this camp, something that goes far beyond simply having good players. And to understand exactly why the rest of the world should be afraid, you have to understand how deep the fear used to run in the other direction first. For 24 years, Brazil was the opposite of feared. Brazil was the team everyone secretly hoped to draw in the knockout rounds, because everyone knew the pattern by heart. They would arrive dangerous, dazzle through the group stage, and then, right when it mattered most, something would always go wrong. 2006, France simply outthought them and sent them home. 2010, the Netherlands scored twice in 15 minutes and ended the dream before Brazil understood what was happening. 2014, on home soil, in front of their own nation, Germany scored 5 goals in 18 minutes and finished 7-1, the single most humiliating collapse in the sport's history. 2018, Belgium ended them. 2022, Croatia did it on penalties. 6 tournaments, 5 different killers, 1 identical outcome. Brazil, for 2 decades, was a team that talked a big game and consistently found a way to lose it. That reputation is exactly why nobody outside their own camp saw what was coming. Because after their worst qualifying campaign in history, a 4-1 humiliation against Argentina, a first-ever home defeat in qualifying, coaches fired, chaos everywhere, Brazil made a decision that quietly changed everything. They broke 100 years of tradition and hired a foreign manager for the first time ever, Carlo Ancelotti, the most decorated club coach alive, a man with more Champions League titles than anyone in the sport's history. And what Ancelotti built wasn't flair for the sake of flair. It was a machine engineered specifically to leave opponents with no good options. Look at what he did to Vinicius Jr. alone. For years, Brazilian fans asked the same furious question. How can this man destroy the best teams in Europe every single week for Real Madrid, and then look ordinary in a Brazil shirt? Ancelotti solved it by doing something almost insultingly simple. He just played Vinicius in the exact same role, the exact same pocket of space, that made him lethal at club level. The result has been the best version of Vinicius Jr. international football has ever seen, scoring in every single group game, level with Mbappe and Haaland for goals at this tournament, and somehow still only 1 behind Messi. That is not luck. That is a coach who understood exactly which weapon to load and exactly where to point it. And then there's the part that should really worry everyone left in this competition, the players waiting behind the starting 11. Most nations at this World Cup would happily start Gabriel Martinelli, the man who came off the bench and scored the winner in the 96th minute against Japan when the entire tournament looked ready to end early.
Guimaraes. Pass through, what a goal, Martinelli!
Most nations would build their entire attack around Endrick, a teenager who changes the rhythm of a match within minutes of stepping onto the pitch. And most nations do not have the luxury of Neymar, Brazil's all-time leading scorer, still waiting patiently on the bench, still capable of deciding a knockout game in a single moment, held back not because he isn't good enough, but because this Brazil side simply doesn't need him yet. When your unused weapons are that dangerous, you are not just a good team. You are a problem nobody has a clean solution for. This is the version of Brazil currently sitting in this tournament, and here is the number that should genuinely frighten anyone still left in the draw. 9 goals scored, only 2 conceded, and they have not yet played a truly complete 90 minutes. They stumbled against Morocco. They needed a stoppage time miracle against Japan, and they are still, by nearly every measure, the most dangerous team remaining. Teams that win comfortably when they're firing on all cylinders are dangerous. Teams that win ugly, ragged, nervy knockout games while clearly not yet at their best, and still find a way through, those are the teams that go on to lift trophies. History across every major tournament tells you the same thing. The sides that survive scares early usually peak exactly when it matters most. So think about what that actually means for whoever Brazil faces next. This is a team built by a manager with no weaknesses left to exploit, carrying a player in career-best form, backed by a bench that could start for most nations on earth, defended by a goalkeeper who has barely been tested, and still holding their biggest individual weapon in reserve. 24 years of pain built this version of Brazil, whether anyone intended it that way or not. Every heartbreak, every humiliation, every quarterfinal collapse forced this federation to eventually break the one rule they swore they'd never break. And in doing that, they built something far more complete than the flair-only sides of the past. The rest of the world spent 2 decades waiting for Brazil to embarrass themselves again. They should probably stop waiting, because the team walking through this World Cup right now isn't hoping to get lucky anymore. It's a team that has already shown it can win playing badly, win playing scared, win in the dying seconds against opponents who did everything right, and it hasn't even reached its own ceiling yet. 9 goals, 2 conceded, 1 rule broken, and an entire generation of players who finally have no excuse left not to deliver. If you're still in this tournament and Brazil is anywhere near your side of the bracket, you already know the truth nobody wants to say out loud. You should be terrified.